Why does God endorse the acts of the assassin Phinehas? Israelite men engage in sexual acts with Moabite prostitutes and worship the Moabite god Baal Peor in Numbers 25. God was enraged. Moses commands to kill only the people who worshipped Baal Peor. Up to this point, the entire episode involves Israelites and Moabites, nobody else. Verse 6 changes everything. Behold, a man from the children of Israel came and brought the Midianites close to his brothers in front of the eyes of Moses and the eyes of the entire congregation of the children of Israel. And they were weeping at the door of the tent of meeting. We're later given their names, but now the Israelite man is described as innocuously as possible, while the woman is presented as the Midianites, implying she was either important and or known to everyone. What was wrong with bringing a Midianitess into the camp? People were crying and becoming hysterical at the sight of this woman and man together in the camp. Impulsively, Aaron's grandson Phinehas rises up and stabs the two of them, killing them with a spear. God responds to Phinehas' actions by endorsing them and ending a plague that had already caused 24,000 deaths. At this point, the text introduces the two slain individuals, and they are VIPs, a prince of Simon and a princess of Midian. God then announces he wants vengeance against the Midianites, not the Moabites. How can we make sense of God's decision to target the Midianites and not the Moabites? And what did Zimri do wrong? Even more confusing is that 31:16 contains a different version of what occurred during this event sequence. Behold, these, referring to the Midianite women, caused the children of Israel, through the advice of Balaam, to commit sins against God on the subject of Peor, causing the plague in the congregation of God. This is inconsistent with the text in Numbers 25, which specifically said it was the Moabite women. How do we juxtapose these two verses? Perhaps the way to begin is not to read 25 verses 1 to 3 as a block of sentences, but as separate verses. When done this way, we can see the Israelite men approached the Moabite women and offered to pay for sex, for it says, the nation began to prostitute the daughters of Moab. The Israelites were the initiators. While the Bible uses the harsh word liznot to describe the acts, because the men initiated, it seems like consensual sex rather than prostitution. Did God get upset? No. The text continues. Perhaps the second stage to these ongoing encounters was the introduction of a religious component to the arrangement. The Moabites were only willing to participate if it involved worshiping their gods. Ancient prostitution often was linked to temple worship and deities associated with sex and fertility. Did the Israelites back out of the deal? No, they didn't. Did God get upset? No, again he didn't. The text continues, depicting a third stage to the deteriorating practices of these Israelite men when they became, quote-unquote, attached to a local deity called Baal Peor. Rashi explains the worship of Baal Peor involved producing excrement in front of it. Now God becomes angry. The first two verses of chapter 25 point the finger at the Moabitesses. They were involved in the sexual transgressions and involved the Israelite men in sacrifices, dining, and worship. But even in those verses, God doesn't get upset. It's only with the introduction of Baal Peor that God becomes irate. The word attachment indicates a different level of worship, and it seems God was prepared to forgive the casual sinning done by the Israelite men. But when the Israelites become attached to another deity, then God changes his stance and wants to punish the men. The Midianites seemingly got the Israelite men committed to this depraved Baal Peor. Could it be the Midianite women replaced the Moabitesses at this juncture because Balaam became involved? Is this the reason for the unusual use of the word tziror, meaning deception, to depict the Midianites? Was this the deception to which the Torah is alluding? Balaam was supposed to bless Israel, but apparently tried to deceive God by implementing a covert plan to curse Israel by using the willing Midianites. This is what upset God and caused him to launch an immediate plague against those who were attached. But there's one more aspect that must have peeved God. If a princess of Midian was involved, then this meant full-scale endorsement from the hierarchy of Midian. This wasn't some isolated women gone rogue. This had intent. What about Kozbi? What was her role? Why is she referred to in full name, lineage, and then as their sister? But her being called sister means she was parallel to the men, perhaps equal in the decision-making. When Kozbi strolls through the camp with Zimri, the text takes the time to say this was done in front of the eyes of Moses. How did anyone know her name? If she were a prostitute, Would she have been using her real name and ensuring everyone knows she was a princess? This seems highly unlikely. It seems more likely she was part of a developed plot to bring down Israel, perhaps in retribution for what they considered inappropriate treatment of another princess of Midian, Zipporah, Moses' possibly estranged Midianite wife. For this objective, you can use your real identity. But how did anyone know her name once she was dead? If she were really a princess from Midian and a decision-maker, a sister, one Israelite who spent years living with this desert tribe would recognize such an influential Midianite on sight. Moses would have known her instantly. He also would have figured out this was not about sex or prostitution, it was about bringing a curse to the nation. We can understand now why God was upset, and only with the idol worshippers and the Midianites. But the text records the people crying, and this is very perplexing. If we follow the commentators, they feel that the people were crying because Zimri and Kozbi were going to have sex in the tent of meeting. Would people cry over that? It seems highly improbable. We know what upset God, but what upset the people? A closer look at the text will show us what has been overlooked. The word kov is used 9 times in the Tanakh, 8 times in the Balak-Balaam story in chapters 22 through 24, where it means curse in most of its appearances. When Phinehas pursues Zimri to kill him, the same root word appears twice in the same verse. But here, most commentators translate the word differently. And he came after the man of Israel to the tent, and stabbed both of them, the Israelite man and the woman, through their bodies. And the plague that was on the children of Israel stopped. The first time kov is used, it's translated here as tent. The second time it's translated as their bodies. What if we were to substitute the word curse both times in the translation as such? And he came after the man of Israel to the curse, and stabbed both of them, the Israelite man and the woman, through their curses. And the plague that was on the children of Israel stopped. What could this translation possibly mean? The text tells us that the crying occurred when Zimri and Kozbi, whose name means deception, were seen walking through the camp. Something that they were doing or wearing elicited this reaction. It's not about what they were going to do later, it was about that moment. What caused the people to weep? It had to be something very powerful. What did the former slaves fear the most? Likely the answer is the Egyptians. A former prisoner fears being arrested and going back to prison more than anything else. What if seeing Kozbi somehow caused the people to believe that the Egyptians were taking revenge on them? The presence of Kozbi was accompanied by a vicious plague that was in the process of decimating them at that very moment. It killed 24,000 people in the camp. What triggered the people to cry? The text repeatedly draws our attention to what the people saw. The eyes of Moses, the eyes of the congregation. The crying begins when Zimri parades Kozbi through the camp. This suggests something visible about Kozbi, and possibly also Zimri, was central to the episode. Whatever it was terrified the people into thinking that the plague and the incident with Baal Peor was Egypt taking revenge on the Israelites. Egyptian and Near Eastern religious symbols were often worn on the body. If Kozbi was displaying a recognizable symbol, such as an eye tattoo, associated with Baal Peor because of the ongoing plague, the population might have been terrified. There was such an eye tattoo that royal Egyptians wore, known as the Eye of Horus. Symbols of Baal Peor included Shamash, a local version of the god Horus. What if Kozbi had such a tattoo? Perhaps it was over her right eye, as was common, and the sight of this tattoo caused people to fear the Egyptian god Horus, not the Israelite god, was slaughtering Israelites by the thousands as this was happening. That might produce a reaction of weeping and fear. What if the attachment of the Israelite men to Baal Peor meant they all received tattoos? When Moses commanded the elimination of the people involved, how would anyone know who was involved? It would be very simple to identify them if they had all received facial tattoos. If Zimri also had a matching tattoo with Kozbi and walked through the camp as the plague was ongoing, that would have caused a tremendous reaction of horror, disgust, and fear, and yes, crying. What may have been overlooked in the understanding of this episode is the emotion of the characters involved, what Zimri and Kozbi did to aggravate and frighten everyone, and lastly, what caused one man, Phinehas, to leap impulsively into action. Let's look again at our newly translated verse. And he came after the man of Israel to the curse, and stabbed both of them, the Israelite man and the woman, through their curses. And the plague that was on the children of Israel stopped. And this is precisely why God endorsed Phinehas' actions. God wanted to say that he controlled the plague, not Horus or the Egyptians.
Thanks for watching.